Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies behind successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. And I'm your host, Teasha Cable, CEO of C Model Data. And today's episode is a personal one for me. My guest is my mentor, my friend, and my co-founder at OpenDI. She is also the original pioneer of decision intelligence, which is the discipline that I have built my own life's work around, and one of the true architects of modern artificial intelligence. I will say this with full conviction. The future of decision intelligence runs straight through her. It is an honor to introduce you all to Dr. Lorien Pratt, who is the chief scientist and co-founder of Quantellia and co-founder of OpenDI. So I'm going to keep going with her a little bit before I give her the reins. So back in the early 1990s, as a computer science professor, Lorien invented something called transfer learning. So I'm going to call it discriminability-based transfer algorithm, showed that neural networks could reuse what they had already learned to master new tasks faster. This is an idea that now sits underneath today's large language models and computer vision systems. So for nearly 2 decades, though her focus has shifted from just building models into something that she argues matters even more, decision intelligence, her case is simple and it's sharp. Traditional business intelligence tells you what already happened, and decision intelligence models the future impact of the choices that you make right now and treats a decision as an engineering asset that you can design. So, Lorien, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. I'm pumped. I want you to talk about the Decision Intelligence Handbook, talk about Link, talk about all the things. But first, just, introduce yourself to the audience in your own words.
Hey, Teasha, I am so honored to be here, and thank you for that fantastic introduction. Thank you to your listeners for their time today. We promise to keep this pumped up and make it interesting and hopefully impact you and your career. I truly believe decision intelligence is the future of AI and one of the most important technologies for the 21st century. Why? Because it connects all that tech that we have to the outcomes we care about. And what's really interesting about this moment in, the evolution of technology, especially AI, is we're not really focused on outcomes. We're sort of obsessed with the tech. I call them solutionistas. We focus on the tech. But pick up your favorite AI article and check to see whether it ever talks about the outcomes that AI is meant to achieve, as opposed to all the things it might try to convince you to token max, right?
Come on.
A few years from now, we'll realize that that's gotten a little old. And what we really care about is achieving business outcomes, whether they're profit margins for a commercial company, the health of our constituents if we're in public health, the happiness of the people in our country if we're in government, or any other kind of measurable outcome that you care about. So it's a really, really exciting moment. So I'm really honored to be here. I'm a computer scientist. I have 3 computer science degrees. Something about the history of AI is I have 2 AI degrees that I got in the 1990s, right? My master's in AI is from 88. My PhD is from 92. AI does go back a ways, guys. And one of the ways that you can master AI is don't just fall for this fiction that AI is a new thing that only came out in the last couple of years. There's actually a deep history in AI and a whole bunch of really valuable tools. In fact, I read recently that even large language models, OpenAI, uses some traditional AI techniques to do some of its codex code completion work. So, we like to think it's all about large language models, but it's not. And so I guess that's my background is as a computer scientist. And I could talk about how I sort of came from that computer nerdy thing to decision intelligence, if that's helpful.
Yeah. Well, it's coming. I'm going to ask it specifically. So one of the things you were going right there. So you invented transfer learning, which now that this is work like you just talked about that sits under GPT and modern computer vision systems that we're looking at right now. That's a really remarkable legacy. But then you said, I'm going to push not just for pure machine learning, but I'm going to go towards decision intelligence. I do want you to walk me through that pivot? Like watching AI capability explode, what made you decide that the real problem is not really building more powerful models, but connecting intelligence to actual decisions?
Sure. Well, my career trajectory led me from being a college professor, tenure track at the Colorado School of Mines, to ultimately becoming a technology analyst, which, if you know that field, it's the opposite. Everything I'd done before was sort of sell side invention side of innovation. And now I'm interviewing people and asking them, what do they need of technology? And it was the shock of my career, Teasha, that as an analyst, interviewing people, asking about how they thought about tech, especially senior leaders, a lot of them in Fortune 500 global organizations, hundreds of conversations per year I had the honor of conducting with people who were interested in buying tech. And they couldn't even spell AI, and they didn't even want spreadsheets in the room, let alone data knowledge management and this whole tech stack that we had built. So I had made this assumption that if I was inventing things, I got an NSF Career Award, which is a pretty prestigious thing. I was on the program committee of NeurIPS. I was doing all the things that put me at the top of my career as an academic. I made this assumption that there was some system by which that great work would get translated into people actually using it to help measurable things.
Right.
And the answer was no, there was this chasm. And so I set out to investigate that. I quit my job as an analyst in 2008, and I started a year investigation just doing what I knew, which is interviewing people, really trying to dig into this. Why is it that all this great neural network, machine learning, symbolic AI, rule-based stuff wasn't making it into the most important and impactful decisions? You'd think naively that as you get more senior in a company, the care to which key decisions is made increases, that people would get more careful, more thoughtful, more formal, more considered, better reviews. No, it's the opposite. And I've come to believe it's something about primate dominance dynamics that like the tall guy gets the job, and the person who can tell the best story and make the best case and is the most convincing gets to decide what the decision is, as opposed to a thoughtful, considered, evidence and data-driven decision. And
Yeah.
and so that was like, I guess the second shock of my career is I just assumed that if decisions were having a big impact, that they would get more serious, but it's actually the opposite. As you get more senior away from the tech stack, you're less likely to be rigorous. And multi-billion dollar decisions are made in 5 minutes. So that was a shock. And then based on that, long story short, did a bunch of interviews and invented DI and wrote the first DI paper in 2008, and
Yeah.
then labored alone in the wilderness for 10 years till I found you, and then it was all good.
Yay! Can we just say thank you for laboring though? Because what has come out is probably exactly what you've imagined, that you can take decision intelligence and it opens up the world for so many people. A lot of times I'm talking to people who are building things and they're like, it's this. I'm like, no, it's decision intelligence. And so you probably need to see Lorien. So you talk about this last mile problem. I talk about this too now. So thank you for the language. Organizations, they have these huge data lakes, sophisticated models, and advanced analytics, and yet they are still stuck when it comes to making real choices. Can you give us a specific example of an organization, and you don't have to give their name, with extraordinary technical firepower that was completely stuck on the last mile, and explain what you saw as the disconnect, and how much of it was technical versus organizational versus conceptual?
Sure. $1 trillion resources company, one of the largest organizations in the world, had spent 10 years building a digital twin of its operations.
Mm.
10 years and tens of millions of dollars. And by the time they invited us into the picture, that digital twin had not been deployed. Nobody was using it. It's in microcosm what I saw in tech as a whole, that these assets make it only so far and then they get stuck, they get blocked. So we came in, and what we realized was a pattern I've seen so many times in the last 20 years, where the tech people were the ones who were being asked to second guess what the business outcomes were. And the smart tech people and the senior analytics leaders, they start to get that tech people can't really understand business. outcomes and how business outcomes connect to business decisions. So that was that they'd started to realize that. But okay, problem, but what's the solution to that? They didn't have a language for the tech people sitting down with the business people. And by the way, a diversity of folks, stakeholders, shareholders, users, people from all over the organization, to get everybody's great ideas onto a single map of what the decision is. And by doing this decision intelligence thing, they are now, we just finished a training course. We flew halfway around the world to do it.
Yay.
And now every decision they do, they at least create a DI, a CDD, a picture decision. And for some of them, they're starting to automate them and connect them to operations research, optimization tools, connect them to their data stacks. So that's just one example. I have a few others. I mean, the pattern is, as you just said, huge investment in the tech stack, that last mile. And so, beautiful platinum links in the chain, but one link is missing. So the whole chain is wasted.
Yeah, and now I want to dig into the causal decision diagram view in the chain. So decision intelligence uses causal decision diagrams to model, you mentioned this a second ago, how today's actions create tomorrow's impacts, which is a world away from correlation and pattern matching. So when you sit down with executives trained on dashboards, trained on KPIs, how do you move them from asking what happened to asking, if we do this, what happens next? And then what? What does that conceptual shift actually take?
That's a terrific question. A lot of organizations have been living in KPI land, and it's actually not really hard, because if they have their KPIs and their dashboards and they've been living with it for a while, they realize that the KPIs don't tell them what to do. The KPIs are more, the example I like to think of is like a GPS on your car. And what if the GPS on your car didn't say, turn left in 300 feet? What if it just said, alert, there's traffic? That's what a KPI is, right? It's useful. I mean, and the GPS that says alert, there's traffic would be better than nothing.
Right.
But it doesn't go as far as analyzing all that information and making a recommendation for what to do next.
Yeah.
Right. So that key distinction between serving information, even predicting the future, there's going to be traffic, right? GPS does that too, but that's still not enough, right?
That's right.
But, why can't we hold the computers accountable for putting all that information together and saying a recommendation? Here's what we should do. And it's funny, we did have recommender systems back with Amazon and collaborative filtering, 10, 15 years ago, but it was all about recommending which book to buy or which product you might like. And if you click into what that does, it's not really extendable or scalable to the complex multi-link decisions that large organizations make. So yes, we've had things called recommendation systems around a long time, but they are too simple because they grew up in that very simple decision. What product should we recommend, which is much simpler than most organizations.
That's right. Oh, so good. Okay, here we go. Let's keep going because I've got so many more for you. That's so good. Through OpenDI.org, woohoo, shout out to us. You are building open standards, community-driven rather than proprietary. I mean, this is a real strategic choice that we've made. How do you balance the push for standardization and broad adoption against the commercial incentives that usually drive technology? So, what convinced you? I know why, we talk about this together, right, in our group, like, why are we doing this? But tell me what convinced you early on that these open standards were the right path rather than making Quantellia like a dominant platform?
Great question. I think it's just really obvious if you look at the history of tech. When I was a technology analyst, my focus was on telecommunications. And it used to be that, I don't know if you're probably not as old as me, Teasha, that if you made a call on Sprint, you couldn't call somebody who was on a non-Sprint long distance network, that there wasn't that interoperability between the telephone carriers. And even further ago, even local phone calls, there wasn't interoperability between the local players. So every time a technology does kind of an explosion breakout, there is a standardization that happens. There was a time when cars didn't all have steering wheels and we standardized on the steering wheel, right? There was a time when cell phone networks weren't standardized, as I said. And so we just see this standardization and interoperability as one of the core driving forces to how technical disciplines mature and then start to explode. I think the most exciting one is the internet, right? WWDC created HTML. And, I was on computers that were networked before we had those standards, and it was clunky as heck. I won't tell you what it took to send an email. It was like 15 characters long, and there were all these exclamation points in it because we didn't have standardization. So all we have to do is work by analogy and know that we need interoperability standards in order to succeed. In terms of the tension between that and the commercial value, I guess the simple answer to that is a rising tide raises all boats.
Come
So if
on.
the entire discipline is exploding, then we
Yes.
all benefit, right?
That's right.
And
That's
if
right.
it doesn't have this, imagine if you had to get a special mouse just for your computer and we didn't have the USB standard. There was a time when we had the PS2 mices, and one was for Macs and the other was for PCs, and they weren't interoperable.
That's
And,
right.
that kind of friction really holds a technology back. And so we, at OpenDI, as you know, you and me decided to get ahead of that and to create this open interoperability standard. And of
I
course,
love it.
anybody in DI will be using it 5 to 10 years from now, because that's how we get an ecosystem of vendors who all, we can't all be the whole vertically integrated stack. That never worked. United
Never worked.
Airlines tried to buy hotels once. It doesn't work.
That's right.
Right? You
That's
need that
right.
diversification.
You absolutely do. And thank you so much for that. And thank you for explaining it in that way. I think it's one of the most important initiatives of all time related to getting everybody the opportunity to manage the last mile, which is going to be incredibly important. So you are vocal about organizations that collect data for its own sake, or they buy AI tools with no decision model behind them. So when you consult, how do you help leaders to tell the difference between decision support, like genuine, real decision stuff, versus what we might call, you and me, AI theater, which is adoption that looks impressive, but it doesn't improve a single choice that you're making? What kind of questions should a leader be asking before they invest to be sure that they're solving a real decision problem?
They should know what their decisions are, because I promise you that no matter how great your tech is, no matter if you spend millions on your tokens and you have the best LLM, the best data lake in the world, if you're not crisp and agreed as to what your decision is, it'll break, right? And the most shocking thing I ran into when I started consulting in the early noughts about this was that I go into a room and the first question we ask when we say, what is your decision? Is we say, how are you going to measure your outcomes? And if there were 6 leaders in the room, there were 6 different opinions of how we're going to measure your outcomes. And I promise, if you've got 6 people all pulling in different directions, then who cares about the tech, right? Right?
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
to answer your question, the first thing we do, which is really weird for a technologist, is we say, throw the data out of the room. Now, sometimes, it's a data person who invited us to the meeting, so we let them talk for a day just, so that they can establish their authority. But my favorite is to keep the data out of the room until we've asked those. It's really simple. It's like, let's all agree as to how we're going to measure our outcomes. Let's all agree as to what our choices of actions are. Are there other choices we didn't think of? Let's all agree to our externals. What are we going to measure? And, this is where AI really helps as an assistant, because it's very good at brainstorming about like unintended consequences, outcomes that might happen as a result of our actions that we didn't think of, or new actions that hadn't occurred to us, because it's got a brain the size of the internet planet, so it can think of actions for your decisions. It's terrible at wiring those up causally, like this action causes this, causes this, causes this, causes this. That chain
Yeah.
of the LLMs are just terrible at that.
That-
But so our first meeting is with humans, and we start with the human decision maker. We keep them central, and we take the data as secondary data and evidence and knowledge as in support of that human decision maker.
Come on, the human in the loop in real life. Hey, so I want to have this encouraging message. This is for our audience. I want you to think about your own organization's decisions and data. Where are the gaps between the information you have and the choices that you need to make? Share your take with us on LinkedIn and other social media. Use Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Okay, so you are a strong advocate for keeping humans in the loop, as we just discussed, rather than handing decisions to full automation. So this is a really pointed stance, especially right now in 2026, when agentic AI is the loudest story in the room. And the pitch is that autonomous systems can decide faster and better than we can. Can walk me through your thinking? When you design a decision intelligence system, how do you decide which choices genuinely benefit from AI augmenting human judgment versus the ones that could, in theory, run themselves? And what makes you skeptical of the fully autonomous vision so many are like trying to sell right now?
It depends on the kind of decision, right? So historically, machine learning decisions like insurance underwriting, that Amazon recommendation for a book, when Facebook decides to show you content, these kinds of decisions that happen thousands of times a day, program trading decisions, absolutely a great fit for fully automated pattern-based decisions. When this happens to this, when this happens to this, when this happens to this.
So when you design a decision intelligence system, how do you decide which choices genuinely benefit from human judgment versus all the stuff, the fully autonomous vision that a lot of people are trying to sell to us right now?
Okay, so first of all, traditional machine learning decision making is only possible if you've got a lot of data. So you've got samples of what the input should be, what the result should be. For this person, show them this product. For this person, show them this product, because historically when we showed them that, they bought it, right? So number one, if you have those kind of repeated decisions, you're going to use traditional machine learning pattern recognition. For agentic is very good at the choices that happen inside the digital world. So if you think of asking an agent to make a plan to go out and get some research reports and look at some websites, even things like sending an email and taking some actions, what it's terrible at is decisions that happen outside the digital world. So, and knowing what their consequences are going to be.
That's right.
Hiring this employee, right?
Yeah.
Changing these terms in a contract, opening a new business in this particular place, starting a marketing campaign. These are all choices of actions that we take that have a ripple effect in the outside world. Hiring this employee, they have this reputation. It'll affect these other employees. It'll affect your productivity. The people you hire have these ripple effects on things. So those outside the digital realm choices, those actions to outcomes that are external, LLMs are terrible at, and I believe will always be terrible at because of their stochastic parrot nature. In fact, we all know how LLMs are great at coding, and I'm the first person to say they're really helpful with coding, but they don't use LLMs for coding. It just came out a couple days ago that OpenAI uses some 1982 parser token recursive descent parsing technology.
That's right.
It has all this symbolic stuff.
That's right.
All the symbolic stuff, and then the LLM is good at having the conversation with that. But that multi-link reasoning, chain of thought reasoning about things outside of the digital realm, that's where I would really be very cautious about using agentic right now.
I think it's so important because what you're revealing is this is why the way that I frame this question around sort of the movie version of that AI is doing this stuff is so not real, because there is a decision system going on and it's usually human, right? Or it's based on something that a person has said and done or seen in a room for 20 years and then documented it and trained another model to understand it and do it, so that it's at the core of all of this, which is why I always come back. And lately I've been telling folks the difference between what I believe the machine can do and why, to me, the human is actually making this decision is because belief is still in there. A human being believes that something is true and then can, boom, decide, whereas a machine is going to select or predict something based on some existing value that it's seen. And I just think it's so core in understanding why some of these systems will and won't work ever. without human beings continually being very, very involved and giving all of our ideas and thoughts. So really, really great. So
Totally right.
one of the things you describe are these how organizational silos are a primary blocker. So when people try to figure out why isn't all this AI being implemented in these organizations, and it's super interesting how some of these tools now, like people want to implement Claude and GPTs as organizational tools, they're going to run into the same blockers. But you prevent these silos are a primary blocker, which creates this sort of whack-a-mole effect where you fix one thing in one department and it quietly triggers another crisis in another department. Can you kind of give a real example of that playing out when you help an organization to design its decision architecture, essentially? How do you surface the cross-functional dependencies and the feedback loops that leaders miss because they're so deep inside their own function? And the new way that they want to use these AI tools, by the way, are going to create more silos because the tools aren't meant to like share context across them. What does it take to get a siloed team thinking systemically?
God, I love your questions, Teasha. I feel like you did like 6 hours of homework. I mean, these are the best questions I've ever had on a podcast. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, what's nice about the answer to that is it still starts with a single decision. So an example we had was a U.S. government agency had to make decisions about whether to decommission some of their buildings. Because with COVID, fewer people were coming into the office, so they thought they could save a lot of money. There were all kinds of complexities to this decommissioning because they were trying to decide, well, maybe if we fixed the HVAC, we could keep this building going a little bit longer. Or if we repaired the roof, we could keep it going a little bit longer. And as we mapped that decision, we learned that there were these externals. And this is one of the core things you do with a CDD, of course, is you say, what are the external factors that combine with my choices that lead to my outcomes? And when we did that map, we learned that there's no way that this team could make the right decision because their externals were decisions made by another team, which were systematically undermining their ability to make the good decision about which buildings to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sort of emerges organically as you're saying, well, what can I control? What can I not control? And this is one of my favorite things is if you're being held responsible for a set of outcomes, insanity is being held responsible for outcomes over which you have no authority to affect those outcomes. This asymmetry between your authority and your responsibility is a really bad organizational dynamic setup. And that's what these folks realized is as they said, well, what can we control and what can we not control? They realized it was the things that they couldn't control that were having the biggest impact on their outcomes. Recipe for insanity, asymmetry between the responsibilities and their authorities. And so just analyzing one decision at a time helps you get to that. Obviously, then you'd want to model that decision of that other team and then do some analysis to say, how can we shift those authorities and responsibilities? And the principle is, if you're responsible for something, you'd better have the authority to change the things that affect it. But unless you draw that causal diagram, it often isn't really crisp whether you do have that authority or not to change the thing that you're responsible for. And I would ask your listeners, if anybody's frustrated at work, ask if your authorities are at the level that actually affect your responsibilities. And if you can find an authority responsibility mismatch, there's two answers. One, give me more authority, or the other is go to your boss and say, I can't be held responsible for this because I don't have any authority over the factors that influence this. So you need to make a change to whose authority is what.
That's
and this
so
question,
good.
Decision rights. Have you heard this starting to
That's
emerge?
right. I have. I love it. Yeah. And decision process that really accommodates for decision rights. So good, Lorien. Such a good explanation. So you guys go out and ask that question. Okay, Lorien, fun stuff now. We are going to explore your decision-making style. It's through this persona assessment. So I'm going to walk through 4 sets of self-check questions, the kind you might run through in your own head before a decision. Each one is going to be framed through a different decision-making lens. So after each one, you're going to tell me how closely that internal voice matches how you actually decide. And you have a scale of 0 to 100%, and you only get 100% across all 4. So you have to remember that. Okay. Now, don't cheat. And I only give you one at a time. So you'll get the question and then you'll answer that one. So you can't know them all up front. And that way you won't cheat the system. And Just have fun with me. You know everything there is to know about everything I'm saying and probably exactly why I'm saying it, but it's
Why
fun
not?
anyway. Okay, here we go. So this is a treat for the audience. Okay, the creator of decision intelligence is going to answer a decision persona question. This is so great.
Stump the expert. Why not?
Okay, the first one is called the feeler. This is a values driven leader. The persona prioritizes alignment with core values and mission, weighing the human impact and cultural fit of decisions alongside the business metrics.
You probably are.
So here's the feeler question. Before I decide how to advance decision intelligence, whether through Quantelia, OpenDI, or my own writing, I ask myself, beyond the technical innovation and the market opportunity, what does this do for the humans actually trying to make hard choices? Do I make sure the technology helps people understand their trade-offs rather than hiding them inside of a black box? If a more powerful capability means less transparency, do I still protect keeping people meaningfully in the loop? Do I build for frontline managers, public sector leaders, and communities, and not just elite data scientists and executives? So, Lorien, how much does this approach to decisions through this kind of values-based questioning resonate with you?
Am I allowed to say 100%?
Well, you can, but you only get 100% across all four because it's
All
a
right.
trick.
So
It's a tricky
here's what I'm going
test.
to do.
Okay.
75%.
Okay.
And the reason is there's some decisions it's more important that they're correct than that they're transparent. So for instance, if my radiologist is looking at an x-ray, I care way more that he's right about finding cancer or not than that he can explain why.
Oh,
So
that's good.
what I will say is, in my world, 25% of those decisions, the correctness trumps the transparency.
All right.
Since I can't say 100%.
You can't say, well, you could, but then you wouldn't have anything else for the rest of it. And I'm pretty sure a little bit of the
Actually, no,
stuff.
let's call it 50%.
Okay.
So that I can save some of my points.
Okay. 50% feeler. Here we go. The next one is called the planner. It's a strategic visionary. So this persona focuses on long-term implications and future-proofing, always thinking several moves ahead and weighing multiple scenarios. So before I choose a technical direction, a partnership, or how to structure Quintelia's offerings, I ask myself, how does this play out several moves from now? If AI keeps advancing at this pace, does the last mile problem get worse, making decision intelligence more essential? Or could tomorrow's systems optimize decisions directly and route around it? Do open standards through OpenDI create network effects that accelerate the field, or do they commoditize it in ways that make innovation harder to sustain? If regulators keep tightening on AI explainability and accountability, does my causal human in the loop approach become an advantage or a burden? Am I building compounding advantages, standards, and communities that strengthen over time, or optimizing for immediate traction? Okay, Dr. Pratt, how much does that forward thinking scenario planning approach resonate with how you decide?
Holy smokes. There is more information in your question than my answer. So here's my weird answer. 20%.
Okay.
And the reason it's low, because I love to plan. I love to have a beautiful Gantt chart. But the world is just moving too fast. I keep throwing away my plans. And so, you'd think there'd be a plan for what Quantelia is going to do in the next year. Yeah, high level. But if I try to figure out what I'm going to do next month or even next week, boy, events are just moving so fast. I can't plan. And so just because of the volatility of the world in which AI is changing and all this, I've got to be better at being reactive to the moment than being effective in long-term planning.
That's good.
I wish it wasn't that way.
Yeah,
and I try to plan for the future, but then reality, hits me upside the head, right? So there you go.
All right. Are you ready for the next one?
Sure, why not?
Okay, it's called the counter. It's the challenger of assumptions. This persona naturally questions conventional wisdom and looks for contrarian opportunities, often winning by zigging when others zag. So before I accept how the AI industry says things should be done, I ask myself, is the field even solving the right problem? Most organizations are racing to adopt the newest models and pile up bigger data sets, but I argue the real constraint is decision architecture, not AI capability. Do I question the orthodoxies that more data always wins, that automation is the goal, that technical sophistication equals business value? That might explain why so many AI initiatives underdeliver. As I explored in Link, do I keep asking whether we are optimizing for the wrong thing, model accuracy instead of decision quality, automation instead of augmentation, data collection instead of causal understanding? Given that I helped invent this technology and now question how it is used, which assumption most deserves to be challenged?
I've only
So,
got 30% left. I want to
yeah,
use it all for that. I don't know what the next question is,
I know.
I'll put 20 on it because I don't know what that is. But I
Okay.
want to add one thing to your awesome question,
Yes.
which is AI disinformation and propaganda. And so I'm not just questioning the orthodoxy because I'm sort of like a iconoclastic rebel. I'm questioning the orthodoxy because I have never seen so much disinformation backed by trillions of dollars of investment, the
Tell them about
largest
it.
bubble
Yeah,
we have ever seen. So there are many reasons for an AI expert, so-called expert, to say X, aside from X being true.
that's right.
Okay. And so if they say something about agentic or tokens or et cetera, and they're trying to sell you on the golf course the $10 million contract for you to buy OpenDI, and because they say it's inevitable and everybody will be left behind, keep in mind their financial motivation that's below the surface as a covert motivation. And I think that chickens are going to come home to roost in the next few months along these lines.
You
There's a
better preach.
massive amount of AI disinformation. I like to say BS sometimes.
Agreed. Oh, that's awesome. All right, this is great. Here we go. Here's the next one. It's called the data driver, the evidence based decision maker. So, this persona leans on metrics, analytics, and concrete evidence to validate decisions, preferring proof over intuition. So, before I recommend a decision intelligence approach or lock in a technical choice for OpenDI, I ask myself, where's the empirical validation? Do I look for evidence on which frameworks actually improve outcomes, decision quality, time to decision, outcome variance before and after, rather than merely sounds elegant? When I check whether a causal decision diagram reflects reality, do I distinguish a useful simplification from one that misses a critical feedback loop? And then the harder part, do I stay honest about what resists clean measurement, whether leaders truly grasp the causal chains or are just going through the motions, whether an organization has genuinely shifted its decision culture or only adopted the tools on the surface? How do I balance rigorous analysis against outcomes that may not reveal themselves for years, whether leaders make wiser long-term calls, whether an organization avoids a catastrophic error? Okay, Dr. Pratt.
I'm going to steal 15 points from my first answer so that I can have 25 for that one.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, to the extent that I require there to be data and validation first, no, because often the best choices, the best effectiveness of an organization comes out of humans' heads, which has not been captured in any data set or in any structured formal way. So do I try to be very thoughtful about hammer and nailism, saying, I invented the CDD, therefore everyone has to use a CDD? Maybe a little more in the past than recently. These days I have this, we could do a whole other podcast about how you look at your problem definition and decide, is it a pattern decision, a P decision, or a C decision? And maybe neither of those is good. Maybe you just want to use an LLM. I want to be an honest broker because my whole brand is to be credible. And so from time to time, I need to say, no, a CDD is not a good fit for this situation. I had a friend who was working for a 311 organization where people were calling up with problems and then they had to look up at a big database, how to answer like information about the city. That's not a machine learning model or a decision. That's just text pattern matching.
So it's
right?
text pattern matching. That's right.
So
Semantic search of some sort. Yeah.
You got it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just a vector embedding,
That's right.
cosine distance, man. And so I think as you and me, as trying to be credible tech leaders, we need to be honest when it's not a good fit. So I think if we're the hammer, everything's a nail kind of people that everybody else seems to be, everything's LLMs, we lose our credibility. So it's
Agreed.
neurosymbolic, subsymbolic, and guess what? The smart part is this tiny little bit. The software engineers still need to do software engineering and
That's
QA
correct.
and all the traditional coding stuff that they've always done. This is not a magic wand, fairy
Period.
sprinkle dust that you can sprinkle, and AI will mean you don't have to be rigorous anymore. And I think that's one of the
100%.
biggest mistakes is people want that shortcut, especially executives are under pressure to do that shortcut, and it just doesn't exist. It's fairy dust.
It's fairy dust. It's not real. You're going to have to hire the Quintelias and C models of the world, just FYI. Okay, here we go. So you are 35% feeler, 20% planner, 20% counter, and 25% evidence-based data driver. So thank you for that. Would you tell everybody where they can learn more about you and more about Quintelia and more about OpenDI?
I think my favorite place right now is www.learn-di.com. And if you go to learndi.com, it'll point you to a bunch of free resources, including your podcast, Teasha.
Woohoo!
And some e-webinars and the 2 books that I wrote. There's a Decision Intelligence for Dummies book too. You can get that.
I love it.
I
This
didn't
is
write it.
fantastic. Thank you so much. And this is what I love about you, that part right there. The fact that if someone comes and they're really interested in this space, you're not a gatekeeper. And that to me makes you an amazing human being who's really down for creating opportunity for others. And to me, more than anything else, the level of intelligence that you have, the fact that you really truly did create these things, this technology is coming from you. The fact that every LLM call that goes out today is able to work because of some work that you did. I just say your kindness, your heart, the way that you give, and you give things that are substantial. You give knowledge, you give information, you don't gatekeep things that can break somebody else loose. And for me, it's been wonderful, and I'm grateful, and I just really appreciate you, and I want to say that to the world in this moment.
Thank you, Teasha. You're a great friend,
Yeah.
and I'm honored to be here. And thank you to your listeners for taking the time.
Yes. Awesome. So for our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you've enjoyed this episode, we want you to subscribe it, rate it, share it with your network. Let's keep the conversation going on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose.